Good morning, welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, we are talking about North Indian architecture, and last lecture we tried to understand the concept and visualization of Hindu architecture in North India through various examples, and we partly discussed it and covered part of the because a vast field Hindu architecture, and it have vast field, we have not been able to cover all of them. We briefly discussed. Today we will continue from where we left yesterday, and we will try to understand the Hindu architecture in North India. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio the same resource person, Professor Seema Bhava, and she is presently Professor of History in Delhi University, and her area of specialization is Ancient Indian Art, and she regularly writes in different newspaper and magazines on different art issues. So I think her knowledge and critical study of the different styles, different pattern of the different architecture art will help us to understand this topic and give a kind of insight how to study, how to look at this Hindu architecture. So on your behalf, I welcome her for EduSet lecture on this topic. Welcome.
Thank you. Yesterday we had covered how a temple is in the image of man, a Purusha, and this is in terms of the plan, which is through the Vastu Purusha Mandala, as well as an elevation where from the Pedya or the foot up to the Shikhara, the head, the temple is so divided as to look like the Purusha, because even in the image or the icon, you have a similar understanding of the icon as the primeval Purusha. So, this is what gets elaborated during the medieval period. What you have is in the medieval period a horizontal extension of the temple from the main Garbhagriha, which is the womb chamber where the where the icon is enshrined, where you go into the temple and enter the temple, and you have a small Garbhagriha that from that one chamber. Now in the medieval period you have more chambers being added. This is in the horizontal sphere. In the vertical sphere, what you have is that in the tall spire, which you call a shikhara or a vimana, depending on which style of architecture we are talking about, whether it's the North Indian style, which is known as Nagar, or the South Indian style, which is known as Dravid, what you have is that the temple becomes higher. And why does it become higher? Because it's trying to make sure that the Devalya, the Prasada, or which is the temple, achieves that height that represents a Godhead, So, this is very important. The shikhara is not only for ornamental purposes, but it also is something that describes the landscape, when you're looking, if you're in a plains and you're walking along, if there were no buildings, you would see the spire, the shikhara of a temple from very far, and if there are many shikharas, it is like it's a chain of mountains, like the Himalayas, like Mount Meru, like Mount Kailasha, in which the gods dwell. We have this whole concept that the gods live in pristine places such as mountain peaks, So, the temples are basically now representing Godhead, either are Ishwar in themselves. You do darshana of the temple as well as the darshana of the icon. In North India, Hindu architecture, a lot of it was given patronage by rulers, so you have this number of dynasties in the medieval period, the early medieval and the medieval period. You've heard of the Pratiharas, the Rashtrakutas, the Palas, but then there are also smaller dynasties. We have smaller dynasties such as, you have the Chahamanas, you have the Bhaumakaras, later you have the Eastern Chalukyas, the Gangas. So many dynasties come up, all of whom now are trying to make their own temple style. This is something that we have, but they're not just the, we don't only have the dynasts, that is the rulers, but they're feudatories also who are donating to make big temples, and bigger the better, you know. So that is something that you have a competitive kind of a thing where each ruler, successive ruler, tries to make a bigger temple or a more complex temple. Okay. Similarly, you have a lot of patrons in terms of merchants. So you have a lot of mercantile donations, especially in Western India. So you have the temples such as the Dilwara temples that are being made entirely from mercantile donations. So it's not as if only royalty is donating to make temples, but social mobility and religious piety is being projected by the mercantile classes. If they make of a merchant or a merchant guild makes a temple, it, of course, you know, it is for religious purposes, you know, that they say that they get punya from doing this, but one must also admit that they also get social status and are able to display their economic wealth. We are so wealthy that we can make such an elaborate temple. So what we have is that you have a number of architectural styles coming up, each representing a distinct school of architecture, and this you have in Orissa, you have in Central India, Rajasthan and Gujarat, Kashmir, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Bengal, and North Indian style, which is also seen in the Konārak region. Okay, so shall first of all, let's just take the Orissan style. Okay, there are Orissa was a very, very large center of temple, Hindu temple architecture, and you have successive dynasties who patronize Hindu temple architecture, each adding their own elements to it. The first ones are the Bhaumakaras, and at Kitching and other centers you have Bhaumakaras making their presence felt. Then you have the Somavanshis, and then you have the Gangas who develop what is known as Kalinga style of architecture. One of the earliest temples is Parshurameshwar, you know, and it is belongs to the 7th and the 8th century CE. And what you have is a heavy stately Latina shikhar. Now Latina, if you remember, is a curvy linear shikhara. That is, it rises not in a pyramidical or a conical way, but it rises and has a small curve at the top where you have the amlak, which we have done. Okay. Then you have in front of the Garbhagriha, you have a Gudha Mandap with a double sloping roof. All right. And though the interiors are plain, that is, they are not carved, but on the walls you have extensive carving, which is the beginnings, and later this amount of ornamentation of temples gets far more elaborate, you know, as we see in the next temple, which belongs to the Somvanshi period, which is the Mukteśvara temple. Now, Mukteśvara temple is very interesting. Why we have, why is it so interesting is that you have here, you can see, all right, here you can see this is a Toran-like entrance structure, and then you have a low prakara wall. A prakara wall here, you can see this. Now, the prakara wall is the enclosure wall, okay, and then the temple itself does not stand on a separate platform. It is on the base itself, and though a relatively small temple, it has the beginnings of the Kalinga style. All the beginnings you can see behind the so-called Torana, you have the Shikhara. The Shikhara is in a curvilinear form. Here you can see the curvilinear. This is the Amlak and this is the Kalash. The trident on top is a sectarian kind of a symbol. Which god is enshrined inside can be seen through this particular emblem, like a Trishula, or you could have a chakra. This would tell you which deity. Without going inside, you can also make out which deity is enshrined inside. The Kalasha is also important. The Shirsha is also important because usually, not always, but usually it indicates the axis mundi. Under this there is the Brahma Sutra, or the central axis from the Brahmastan of the Vastupurush Mandal passes through this. So, there is a direct kind of a line, okay, and underneath this would be the Garbhagriha, in which the icon would be enshrined. Right beneath this, right beneath this you would have the Brahma Sutra, and you can see that the entrance also would tell you kind of where the Brahma Sutra lies from the Shirsha, or the center of the spire. The center here, you can have the center, and right in the middle, all right, and behind this in the Garbhagriha you would have the okay. Now the third development that takes place is under the Ganga. You have these temples, say at Bhubaneswara. Bhubaneswara becomes the greatest of all towns or urban centers, where you have a number of temples. The Lingaraj is just one of them, right? And here you can see here, right, that you have the curvilinear walls, all right, and in front of it you have the mandapa with the famsana, or the pyramidical roof, all right. The Lingaraja Temple, which belongs to the 11th century, can be looked at as the supreme achievement of the Orisen architecture. The Latina spire, or the Shikhara, is up to 40 meters, rises up 40 meters. The wall is divided into two horizontal registers, and the mandapa in front is very, very sumptuously carved with number of Sursundaris, Vyalas. Sursundaris are beautiful maidens. Vyalas are lions, mythical lions. Then you would have sectarian deities, Lingaraj means that it is a Shaivite temple. So, you have various forms of Shiva carved around in the on the mandapa as well as on the Garbhagriha. The final and perhaps the most famous of all temples of the Kalinga style is Surya Temple at Konārak, all right. And now the Surya Temple at Konārak is so famous because it was mentioned in foreign accounts as the Black Pagoda, because it's made of very dark stone, and also because it, being a Surya temple, has this design where it seems to be being pulled by horses, and you have various wheels, the wheels of the ratha or the chariot carved on the base of the temple, as if the temple is one bigger ratha, the chariot being drawn by the horses of Surya. As you know, Surya Dev, or the sun god, rides on his chariot drawn by 7 horses, and on his chariot he travels the skies from dawn till dusk, and then again that cyclic movement of time continues. So in a way, the Konārak temple also represents symbolically the movement of the Surya or the sun god during the day. It also is very specifically astronomically designed to represent this movement. Okay. Unfortunately, the shikhara has now collapsed. What we have is that you have the mandapa, the Gura mandapa remaining, having a very gigantic Vamsana shikhara, which has 3 stages, and all around this you have musicians and dancers besides the chariot being shown. All right. Then we come to Central India. Now, Central India was very important in the development of architecture, because this was where originally you had the beginnings of temple architecture during the Gupta period. So, sites in and around Satna, Jabalpur, Shivpuri, Allahabad, these are the areas where you have early Gupta architecture developing. These are basically Gurjara and Mahagurjar style, which you have around Gopadari or Gwalior. You have in Bundelkhand, which is known as Jejak Bukti, where Khajuraho developed. Then you have eastern and southern parts of the Hala country, of which Tripuri near Jabalpur was the capital. And in the west, on the areas bordering Gujarat and Rajasthan, you have the Malwa region where Mahamaru style flourished. So there are a number of sub-styles developing based on dynastic as well as regional affiliations. All right. Amongst the first to develop a distinct style are the Pratiharas. Now, Pratiharas, as we know, were a very powerful dynasty in the early medieval period, along with the Palas and the Rashtrakutas, all of whom were competing for sovereignty in North India. So each of them had distinct temple architecture, distinct religious affiliation, and Rashtrakutas made Ellora and the temples. Then the Palas, you have a distinctly, they were patrons both of Buddhism as well as Hinduism. But in Pratihara period, you have mainly Hindu temples and Jaina temples in various regions. Now, at Naresar, you have from the 8th century onwards a group of small shrines, and these are the beginnings of the Pratihara style, where you have a simple latina, that is a curvilinear shikhara, and not too ornamented walls. That is that there's not too much sculpture in and around Naresar. Okay, let's just have a look at these small shrines. As you can see, not all of them have a latina spire. Some of them have a famsana or a pyramidical shikhara also. Any ornamentation here is on the doorways. There are no great mandapas in front. There is basically a garbhagriha with a small antaral or a entrance porchway here. Then this kind of experimentation continues, all right. And you have a variety of spires being tried okay, at various centers, and also masonry You know, it's not necessarily that they were using the English bond method, but the other kinds of putting the stones together was being used. Slowly, you also have architecture coming up in a major way. At Mala Devi is a Jain temple in Gyaraspur, and it is a Shekhari type of shikhara which we've done. And it is one of the earliest in this way, this particular style. Then you have in Indore, you have a temple which is not necessarily square or apsidal in plan, but is star shaped. Then at Barva okay, sorry, this is Jarai or Jara Ki Mat is a temple at Barva. Now here you can see that there is more ornamentation on the doorway. This Barva temple is again also interesting because what you have here is that in this basically Shakta temple, you have a lot of Shaiva affiliations also. Secondly, you would see here, all right, here on the doorway, you see that you have 3 distinct figural bands, all right. These have Mithunas, these have you could, in many temples you have the Navagraha, the 9 planets being represented. These planets or the Navagraha are very important to temple architecture because they provide a kind of protection, okay. From these planets, Rahu and Ketu are considered to be malefic. So they are providing this, and then you have another band, and then this is the Lalat Bimb. Now, Lalat Bimb on the lintel is very again an important element because this tells you where and who is being enshrined inside. And underneath you have Dwarapalas as well as the river goddesses. The river goddesses, Ganga and Yamuna, again are fertility symbols, and underneath you have the auspicious symbols, the Mangala. Ashtamangal, maybe you've heard of, but Mangala or these again provide auspiciousness to the temple. These could include Matsya Yugal, these include pots of plenty and other such. Okay. Then you have the Madhkhera temple at Umri, all right. Here again you can see you have the here you again have the river goddesses and the Dwarpalas, and this is what we call the Dwara Shakhas or the jams. Now these jams is where most stylistic developments in the doorway takes place. This is known as a Stambha Shakha. It is a pilaster. Pilaster is not a complete rounded pillar, but a half pillar, all right. And this is a Roop Shakha, then you have a Patravali and other such symbols, all right. And here again you have the various deities and semi-deities being represented. Now, one great experimentation took place in Telika Mandir, all right. Telika Mandir is one of the earliest temples at Gwalior and stands in the Gwalior fort. As you can probably read from here, that it is rectangular in plan and is capped by a pointed barrel vault. Now, barrel vault is like it's seen basically in Vesar style of architecture, which we had discussed yesterday, and it amalgamates elements of North and South Indian architecture. The barrel vault is also a survival from the times when you had rock cut architecture in at Ajanta. Before that you had it in Kanheri, in Karle, in Bhetsa and other such cave shrines. Now a barrel vault is like, it's like a half a barrel, okay, and it has certain spires in between. This is a temple that I think you would find interesting, because you have very shallow Bhadra and other projections. This is the barrel vault, which looks like the entrance to a cave shrine in the early period. The mandapa is not very pronounced. It stands on a not a very tall plinth or a jagati, and though there would have been sculptures in all these niches, but they are no longer extant, right? Okay. Imitating or going forward from Pratihara, there were numerous feudatories who became independent. First, they worked as feudatories, and later they started becoming more and more independent from the from their main from the main dynasty, which was the Pratiharas. The first and important feudatories are the Kachpa Ghat dynasty, where in whose temples we see a not very tall plinth or a jagati, and an increased elaboration of the Alankara scheme or the sculptural decoration on the walls. Some of the examples are the Kakan Mat in Suhania. Then you have the Sas Bahu temple, which in Gwalior fort, which was completed in 2093, and it's still very extant. Okay. Then the temples at Surwaya, here you can see this is part of a large matha, Shaiva matha and temple complex. Here the sikhara no longer remains, but you can see the elaboration of the decorative scheme as well as some of the pillars here. All right. Also at Kadwaha, I'm not showing you the whole temple, but I wanted to show you how the lintel is made. Okay, so you have the Lalata Bimba and you have Vishnu on the Lalata Bimba. Then you have various, these are the Vyalas and the Mithunas. Mithunas are erotic or amorous couples. You have the Dwarapal kind of figures, and then you have subsidiary mythological tales or narrative tales also being elaborated on the lintel. Then we come to Khajuraho. Now, the Chandelas of Kalanjar and Khajur Vahaka, which was the ancient name of Khajuraho, were feudatories of the Pratiharas who became fully independent under Dhang in 950, who ruled up to 1002. He became independent of the Pratiharas and started building temples. Most of the temples are affiliated to Puranic religion, though of course there have been misunderstandings, and a lot of people, because of the erotic imagery on Khajuraho, tend to say they were tantric in content. But more than being tantric, they have a lot of Puranic imagery. you have a number of kings such as Yashovarman who continued to make temples at Khajuraho, and Yashovarman was a Vaishnav devotee. Many other of the Khajuraho kings at Khajuraho, Chandela kings call themselves Param Maheshwar, which is that they were Shaiva in their affiliations, right? So the Khajuraho temples are very, very elaborate, and they have numerous mandapas or chambers in front of the Garbhagriha. They also have numerous side protections, all right, which make them important. Besides Khajuraho, the Chandelas also built at Mahoba, and Chandpur and Dudhai. Okay. Now, one of the temples, the architectural features of Khajuraho temple are that they are very lofty temples, but they do not have a prakara or a wall surrounding them. What do they have? They have a very high jagati or a plinth, which suggests gives each temple its space, its individual space. All the elements, or the Garbhagriha, the Mandapa, etc., are connected on the longitudinal axis. All right. You have the Mukha Mandapa, you have the Guru Mandapa, Antaral, and the Garbhagriha. And then in the larger temples, you might have an inner circumambulatory with windows, which are known as Bhadra Valkana. Some of the temples are Panchayatana in plan, that is, they have 4 subsidiary shrines on 4 corners. These are known as Karna. Karna means corner, Prasada means temple, so they have Karna Prasadas. Okay. On the elevation, you will see that you have a Jagati, a Pitha, a Vedibandha, Jangha, that is the main wall, and then you have on the main walls you have various projections and balconies, and then you have a Shikhara. If we were to look at the Lakshmana temple, it's a fully developed, very early temple. It is Panchayatana in plan, that is, 4 subsidiary temples are placed on the tall terrace. The sanctum has an ambulatory, and in front of it there is a Guru Mandap. The Guru Mandap and the ambulatory are provided with lateral balconied arms. All right. Sorry. All right. Let me just go back. This is the Lakshmana temple. You can see here that there are Karna Prasadas or subsidiary shrines. You can enter this after climbing a tall Jagati. This is the Mukha Mandapa, this is the Guru Mandapa, and this is the Garbhagriha. Here you have all the windows on the transepts. Okay. All the walls are elaborately sculptured. So you have a number of sculptures here. In terms of style, you will see that they have rounded faces, elongated rounded bodies. Besides the so famous erotic sculptures, which are only 10% of the sculptures at Khajuraho, there are a number of other sectarian sculptures. This is the Vaishnava figure that is enshrined inside. Again, another Vaishnava temple is the Vamana temple, and because it's Vamana, it's Vaishnav, and on one of the niches you have Varaha, that is the boar incarnation of Vishnu. All right. Then you have larger and later specimens such as Kandariya Mahadev. If this is perhaps the most well known of them, we have seen how it rises up in these kind of graded peaks like Meru or Kailasha, the temples. Okay, the Moola Shikhar is basically Nagara. All right, the rest are Samsana, that is pyramidical. These are the windows that we can see here. All right. The other temples are Vishwanatha as well as some Jaina temples like the Parshavnath. One of the last in Dulladeo, who was the last of the main Chandela kings. All right. Then you have the Paramara dynasty, which develops a new style in the Malava region, which is known as Bhumija style. In this, the Shikhara is based on a stellate plan and is divided into quadrants, that is 4 quarters by 4 latas, which are the main, which are the offsets. There is a large hall that has 3 richly carved entrance porches, and at Mukteśvara you have 7 subsidiary shrines which are on the Jagati itself. There are other temples at Siddheshwara as well as other sites. Okay, this is from Badoli, but you can see how the Shikhara rises and with a jalaka or a lattice made of chandrashals. Chandrashals are these rounded patterns which are used in a repetitive pattern on the Shikhara. All right. This Bhumija style spread to other parts such as Rajasthan. So you have Mahanaleshwara at Menal, you have the Sun Temple at Jhalarpatan. You can see that you have Surya in the principal niche, and you have subsidiary deities. Then you have this kind of spires or mini shikharas rising up to the Amalak. You have also at Bija Mandal, one of the Parama temples at Odisha. Then you have in Gujarat, amongst others, Gujarat and Western India, you have the Ambarnath temple at near Thane, and a very interesting temple called the Gondeshwar temple at Sinnar. Okay, you can see that it is the stellite plan is quite elaborate here. Then it is continued up to, this style continued up to the 16th century and spread to eastern Malwa and Bhandeval at Arang. Right? Then you also have the elaboration of the medieval style at Rajasthan, at Ossian. Okay, this is the Sachiya Mata temple at Ossian, where you can see here that more and more denser use of sculpture on the walls of the Jangha as well as the Vedi Bandha, that is the lower portion, is to be seen. But here, of course, the Jangha is very, very elaborately carved. Then you have the Harshad Mata at Abaneri. Abaneri has a step well, which is later, though parts of it can be dated to the 12th century. But the Harshad Mata temple is what is medieval or early medieval in its content. Okay, then we come to Nagda. This is known as the Sasbahu temple, Sahasrabahu, but in colloquial language this is known as Sasbahu. These are twin temples. The larger temple is Sasa, and the lower temple and the smaller temple is the Bahu temple. Now again, why this is so interesting for us is that you have here at this temple here, you can see that you have at the Sasabahu or the Sahasrabahu temple in Nagda, you have here, okay, you can see that here you have the use of a Nagara Shikhara and a Famsana, or simplified Famsana for the Mandapa. Both the temples stand on a large Jagati. There is a Torana here, you can see, at the entrance. Torana is an entrance thing. Also, you can see here, because it's now broken down, how the Shikhara was actually constructed, all right, in a series of small miniature spires or shikharas that marked the bhumis or the talas, right? Okay. There are numerous examples such as Ambika Devi or Ambika Mata at Jagat, Kiraru Temple, all right. Because all of these are very constituent parts, they are becoming more complex. There are multiple moldings on the plinth, and more and more interesting elements are being added. One particular element I'd like to go is into the two temples at Luna Vasahi and Vimal Vasahi at Mount Abu, all right. Yeah, these from the outside are very plain, but inside they are very, very elaborately carved. At Dilwara, where you can see there are a number of toranas and elaborate carvings inside in white and marble. These are Jaina temples, but and having mainly Jaina subjects. So you have a number of Tirthankaras and the miracles that were performed by the Tirthankaras, Yakshis, and other subsidiary deities such as Amba being carved on these temples. You can see that these are very delicately traced, almost carved, almost like temple tracery. This trend continues in Ranakpur. At Ranakpur, you have a Surya temple, but the most, which again you can see has a similar amount of detail, but it is the Jaina temple at Ranakpur that is far more important and elaborate. Okay, you can see on the mandala at Ranakpur as to how elaborate the scheme is, with numerous sub mandapas, pillared halls and transepts being added to the temple. The temple style you have Nagara temple style also in Gujarat at Gopa, which is the earliest temple here. Very, very simple, with an experimental roof, not really a shikhara, but at Roda and in Kutch you have numerous temples coming up, such as at Madhkhera, which is a sun temple, and of course Somnath, which is now been reconstructed, but at Prabhaspatan, but and is one of the more important Jyotirlingas. But this was before it was reconstructed, as it stood on the shores in 1869. All right. Then last I'll do Kashmir. Okay, very quickly I'll try and do Kashmir, which is a sub kind of a style. It has a number of trefoil arches and it has a different kind of a shikhara. It is basically, it combines elements from Gandhar as well as North Indian temple architecture. You have a Latin or a Shakari spire or and a Famsana spire. This you can see in Mantand. But what you do have are very tall pillars which are in the mandapa and as well as in the antaral or the vestibule. Okay. Then you have Avanti Swami, which again I'll just finish, and then you have Pandreta. All right. Again, you can see that there is a certain differentiation. There are many other temples that you have, but it is very difficult to go into every single example because there are thousands of temples being built during the medieval period, each one with its distinct character and it continues up till the 19th century. Thank you.
Okay. So, as you say, thousands of temples, but they have the basic principle, a basic concept.
Yeah, the basic principle remains the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there have been a little bit alteration has been made by the patronage
Yes.
at the patronage of ruler of the time.
Absolutely.
So I think, friends, we have just gave you overview of Hindu architecture, and we'll arrange some more lecture and have an elaborate discussion on this each of these temples in futures. So with this hope, I conclude the lecture, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture. And on your behalf, I thank Professor Seema Baba for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.